before it was beauty, before it was fashion, before it was something women bought in stores and applied in bathrooms and wore on dates and to work and to parties. Red lipstick was something else, something darker, something that had nothing to do with looking pretty and everything to do with something far more ancient, something that civilizations tried to bury, something that religions tried to ban, something that mothers warned their daughters about in whispers that were never quite loud enough to be understood. This is the history they do not teach you. This is the story they do not tell, because the story of red lipstick is not the story of cosmetics or fashion or the ever-changing standards of beauty. It is the story of power. It is the story of what happens when women discover that they can make people look at them. Really look, not glance, not notice, but look in a way that changes something inside the person doing the looking. It is the story of what happens when that power is used, and it is the story of what happens when that power is feared. If you have ever worn red lipstick, if you have ever been drawn to a particular shade of red, if you have ever felt different, stronger, more yourself when you put it on, then you need to hear this story, because the red on your lips is not just color. It is a door, and once you open that door, you may not be able to close it. Settle in. Make yourself comfortable. Turn off the lights if you want. Let the darkness surround you, because this story lives in the darkness, and it wants you to listen. The year is 3500 BC. The place is the ancient city of Ur in Mesopotamia, where the first civilizations are rising from the mud of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here, people have invented writing and mathematics and law. They have built temples that reach toward the sky. They have created art that will last for thousands of years. And they have discovered something else, something that will prove just as powerful as any of their other inventions. They have discovered that certain stones, when ground into powder, produce a red pigment so vivid, so bright, so impossible to ignore, that it seems almost alive. They call it red ochre. They use it for painting, for pottery, for the walls of their temples. And then someone discovers something else. Someone discovers that when you mix this red powder with oil or fat, it becomes a paste. And when you apply that paste to your lips, it stays. It stays for hours. It stays through meals and conversations and the passing of days. It stays like nothing else they have ever seen. The first person to do this is lost to history. We do not know her name. We do not know her face. We do not know why she thought to put red clay on her mouth. But we know what happened next, because the moment she did it, the moment she looked at her reflection in a piece of polished copper and saw her lips transformed into something deeper, richer, more powerful than before, something changed, not in her, in the people who looked at her. They could not look away. They could not stop staring at her mouth, at that red, at the way it seemed to pull their eyes and hold them captive. They They did not understand why. They only knew that they had to look. And the woman, she understood something else. She understood that she had found power. Real power. The kind of power that did not come from wealth or status or the approval of men. The kind of power that came from within. The kind of power that could make people do things they did not intend to do. The kind of power that could change the world. From Mesopotamia, the knowledge spread to Egypt, to Greece, to Rome, to every corner of the ancient world. Women discovered the power of red lips. In Egypt, Cleopatra herself was said to wear a special shade of red made from crushed carmine beetles and ants. She understood the power better than anyone. She used it not just for beauty, but for politics, for control, for making men do what she wanted without ever knowing they were being controlled. But Cleopatra was not the first. She was not even the most powerful. Long before her, there were others, women whose names have been erased from history, women who ruled kingdoms and empires with nothing but the red on their lips. The priestesses of Isis wore red lipstick as part of their religious rituals. They believed that the red connected them to the goddess, that it gave them access to powers that ordinary women could not reach. They were right. The temples of Isis were centers of power. Women came from across Egypt to seek the priestesses' advice, their blessings, their interventions. The priestesses wore red lips as a sign of their status, as a warning, as a promise. When you saw those red lips, you knew you were in the presence of someone who could change your life. When you saw those red lips, you knew you were in the presence of someone who could change your life, someone who could see into your soul, someone who had power you could not understand. The priestesses knew what they were doing. They knew that the red did something. They knew that it made people listen, made them obey, made them forget that they had ever had wills of their own. They used that knowledge carefully, but they used it. In Greece, the story was different. The Greeks were suspicious of red lipstick. They associated it with foreign women, with barbarians, with threats to their civilized way of life. But they also feared it, because they had seen what it could do. They had seen men lose their minds over women with red lips, seen them abandon their families, their fortunes, their futures for a glimpse of that color. They had seen kingdoms fall because a queen wore the wrong shade. They had seen armies turn back because a general could not stop thinking about the red he had seen on a woman's mouth the night before battle. The Greeks tried to control it. They passed laws. They made rules. They tried to limit who could wear red and when and where. But the red did not care about their laws. It spread anyway. In Rome, the situation was even more complicated. Roman women loved red lipstick. They wore it constantly. They experimented with different shades and different ingredients. They passed recipes down from mother to daughter, each generation adding its own improvements. Roman men complained about it constantly. They said it was unnatural, deceptive, a trick designed to fool honest men, but they could not look away from it. The poet Ovid wrote about red lipstick in his Ars Amatoria, a guide to love and seduction. He advised women to wear it. He told them it would make men crazy with desire. He knew what he was talking about. He had seen it happen. But even Ovid did not understand the full truth. He did not know where the red came from. He did not know what it really did. He did not know that when a woman painted her lips, she was not just changing her appearance. She was opening a door, and through that door, something was watching. The Roman Empire fell. The centuries passed, but the red remained. In the darkness of the Middle Ages, when Europe plunged into centuries of superstition and fear, red lipstick took on a new meaning. It became associated with witchcraft. The logic was simple. If red lips made men lose control, if red lips made men forget themselves, if red lips made men do things they would not otherwise do, then the women who wore them must be witches. They must be using dark magic. They must be in league with the devil, because no natural woman could have that kind of power. The witch hunts began. Thousands of women were accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake. Many of them wore red lipstick. Many of them had been seen using it. Many of them had been noticed by men who could not look away. The church preached against red lips from every pulpit. They called it the paint of the devil. They called it the mark of the whore. They called it an abomination before God. Women who wore it were excommunicated, imprisoned, executed, and still they wore it, in secret, in darkness, in the hidden spaces where the church could not reach. They passed the knowledge from mother to daughter. They mixed their colors in hidden rooms. They applied them in front of mirrors that had seen generations of women doing the same thing. They knew the risk. They wore it anyway, because once you have felt the power of red, once you have seen the way it changes how people look at you, how they listen to you, how they remember you, you cannot go back. You cannot be ordinary again. The red will not let you. Consider the case of a woman named Marguerite. She lived in a small village in France in the year 1320. She was not a witch. She was not a prostitute. She was simply a woman who had discovered that red lips made her feel more like herself. She made her lip color from crushed berries and beet juice. She applied it in secret, in her room, with the door barred and the windows covered. But someone saw her, a neighbor, a man who had noticed that Marguerite seemed different lately, more confident, more beautiful, more something. He watched her through a crack in the wall. He saw her apply the red. He saw her look at herself in a small piece of polished metal. He saw her smile, and in that moment, something happened to him, something he could not explain. He became obsessed. He could not stop thinking about Marguerite, about her lips, about that red. It haunted his days and filled his nights. He dreamed about it. He woke thinking about it. He could not eat, could not work, could not think of anything else. He went to the village priest. He confessed that he was being tormented by a woman, that he could not get her out of his mind, that he believed she had cast a spell on him. The priest listened. The priest asked questions, and when he heard about the red on Marguerite's lips, he nodded. He knew what this was. He had seen it before. Marguerite was arrested 3 days later. She was tried for witchcraft. The evidence against her was simple. She wore red lipstick, and men could not look away from her. She protested her innocence. She said the red was just color, just crushed berries, just something she did because she liked the way it looked. But the court did not believe her. They knew the truth. They knew that red was not just color. They knew that red was power, and power that did not come from God could only come from one place. Marguerite was burned at the stake on a cold morning in autumn. Her last words were not a prayer. They were a whisper that the wind carried away before anyone could hear. But the women in the crowd, the ones who watched in silence, their faces hidden beneath hoods and veils, they heard it. They knew what she said. She said, "The red will remember." And it did. The Renaissance came. Art and science and learning blossomed across Europe. The church's grip on daily life loosened. New ideas spread, and with them, red lipstick returned. Queen Elizabeth I of England was perhaps the most famous wearer of red lipstick in history. She wore it constantly, boldly, unapologetically. She understood its power better than anyone since Cleopatra. She used it to project authority, to command attention, to make her courtiers and foreign ambassadors and would-be suitors understand that she was not just a woman. She was a force. She mixed her own shade, a deep, vibrant red made from cochineal beetles and egg whites and plant gums. She applied it with a small brush, carefully, deliberately, making each application a ritual. Her portraitists captured that red on canvas. For centuries afterward, people would see those paintings and feel something stir inside them, something they could not name, something that made them understand, without knowing why, that this woman had power. Elizabeth understood something else too. She understood that red lipstick was not just about looking beautiful. It was about looking powerful. It was about making people look at you and see something they could not look away from. It was about control, and she used that control to rule England for 45 years. That he could not get her out of his mind. That he believed she had cast a spell on him. The priest listened. The priest asked questions, and when he heard about the red on Marguerite's lips, he nodded. He knew what this was. He had seen it before. Marguerite was arrested 3 days later. She was tried for witchcraft. The evidence against her was simple. She wore red lipstick, and men could not look away from her. She protested her innocence. She said the red was just color, just crushed berries, just something she did because she liked the way it looked. But the court did not believe her. They knew the truth. They knew that red was not just color. They knew that red was power, and power that did not come from God could only come from one place. Marguerite was burned at the stake on a cold morning in autumn. Her last words were not a prayer. They were a whisper that the wind carried away before anyone could hear. But the women in the crowd, the ones who watched in silence, their faces hidden beneath hoods and veils, they heard it. They knew what she said. She said, "The red will remember." And it did. The Renaissance came. Art and science and learning blossomed across Europe. The church's grip on daily life loosened. New ideas spread, and with them, red lipstick returned. Queen Elizabeth I of England was perhaps the most famous wearer of red lipstick in history. She wore it constantly, boldly, unapologetically. She understood its power better than anyone since Cleopatra. She used it to project authority, to command attention, to make her courtiers and foreign ambassadors and would-be suitors understand that she was not just a woman. She was a force. She mixed her own shade, a deep, vibrant red made from cochineal beetles and egg whites and plant gums. She applied it with a small brush, carefully, deliberately, making each application a ritual. Her portraitists captured that red on canvas. For centuries afterward, people would see those paintings and feel something stir inside them. Something they could not name. Something that made them understand, without knowing why, that this woman had power. Elizabeth understood something else too. She understood that red lipstick was not just about looking beautiful. It was about looking powerful. It was about making people look at you and see something they could not look away from. It was about control, and she used that control to rule England for 45 years. But even Elizabeth could not fully control the red, because the red had its own plans, its own purposes, its own desires, and it was using her just as much as she was using it. Consider what happened in the final years of her reign. Elizabeth grew old, her skin wrinkled, her hair thinned, her body weakened, but her lips remained red, that same deep, vibrant red that had captivated her court for decades. It never faded, never changed, never aged. Her ladies-in-waiting whispered about it in the corridors of the palace. They said it was unnatural, that no natural color could last that long, that something must be helping it. They were right. Something was helping it, something that had been with Elizabeth since the day she first put on that shade, something that had been waiting, something that was patient. On the night Elizabeth died, the red on her lips was as bright as it had ever been. The women who prepared her body for burial noticed it. They said nothing, but they remembered, and they passed that memory to their daughters, and their daughters passed it to theirs. The 17th century arrived, and with it the Puritans. In England and America, the Puritans took power, and set about creating a society based on their strict religious beliefs. They banned everything that might lead to sin, everything that might distract from God, everything that might give people ideas they should not have. Red lipstick was high on their list. They called it the paint of the harlot, the mark of the fallen woman, the tool of Satan himself. Women caught wearing it were punished, publicly, brutally, in ways designed to humiliate and terrify. And still they wore it, in secret, in darkness, in the hidden spaces where the Puritans could not reach, because the red would not let them stop, because once you have felt its power, you belong to it. You cannot go back. Consider the case of a woman named Patience. She lived in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the year 1650. She was a respectable woman, married to a farmer, mother of 4 children, a faithful member of the church. But she had a secret. She had discovered red lipstick. A traveler had given her a small pot of it years before. She had hidden it away, afraid to use it. But one day, when her husband was away and her children were sleeping, she opened it. She looked at the red. She touched it with her finger. She applied it to her lips. And something happened. Something she could not explain. She felt different, stronger, more alive, more herself than she had ever felt before. She began wearing it whenever she was alone, just in her house, just when no one could see. But someone did see. Her daughter, 7 years old, walking quietly downstairs in the middle of the night. She saw her mother standing before a small mirror, her lips glowing red in the candlelight. The daughter did not understand what she was seeing, but she remembered it. Years later, when the witch trials began in nearby Salem, that memory surfaced. She told a neighbor about it. The neighbor told the authorities. Patience was arrested. She was accused of witchcraft. The evidence: she wore red lipstick. She had been seen using it. She had been noticed. She protested her innocence. She said the red was just color, just something she did because it made her feel beautiful. But the court did not believe her. They knew what red meant. They knew what red did. Patience was hanged on a hill outside town. Her last words were a whisper. The wind carried them away. But the women watching heard. They always heard. The 18th century brought reason and enlightenment. Scientists and philosophers declared that superstition was dead, that humanity had moved beyond the darkness of the past, that things like witchcraft and magic were relics of a more primitive time. And yet, the laws against red lipstick remained on the books in many places. In England, it was technically illegal for women to wear red lipstick well into the 1800s. The law was rarely enforced, but it was there. A reminder, a warning. In America, some states had laws against women wearing face paint in public. These laws were used primarily against prostitutes, but they could be applied to any woman who dared to wear red. The message was clear. Red lips were still dangerous, still feared, still associated with something that polite society could not accept. But the Enlightenment could not explain why. It could not explain the effect. It could not explain why men's hearts beat faster when they saw red lips. It could not explain why women felt different when they wore them. It could not explain what the red really was, so it ignored it. It pretended the fear was just superstition. It pretended the power was just imagination. It pretended that red lipstick was just makeup. And for a while, that worked. For a while, people believed. Something she could not explain. She felt different, stronger, more alive, more herself than she had ever felt before. She began wearing it whenever she was alone, just in her house, just when no one could see. But someone did see. Her daughter, 7 years old, walking quietly downstairs in the middle of the night. She saw her mother standing before a small mirror, her lips glowing red in the candlelight. The daughter did not understand what she was seeing, but she remembered it. Years later, when the witch trials began in nearby Salem, that memory surfaced. She told a neighbor about it. The neighbor told the authorities. Patience was arrested. She was accused of witchcraft. The evidence: she wore red lipstick. She had been seen using it. She had been noticed. She protested her innocence. She said the red was just color, just something she did because it made her feel beautiful. But the court did not believe her. They knew what red meant. They knew what red did. Patience was hanged on a hill outside town. Her last words were a whisper. The wind carried them away. But the women watching heard. They always heard. The 18th century brought reason and enlightenment. Scientists and philosophers declared that superstition was dead, that humanity had moved beyond the darkness of the past, that things like witchcraft and magic were relics of a more primitive time. And yet, the laws against red lipstick remained on the books in many places. In England, it was technically illegal for women to wear red lipstick well into the 1800s. The law was rarely enforced, but it was there. A reminder, a warning. In America, some states had laws against women wearing face paint in public. These laws were used primarily against prostitutes, but they could be applied to any woman who dared to wear red. The message was clear. Red lips were still dangerous, still feared, still associated with something that polite society could not accept. But the Enlightenment could not explain why. It could not explain the effect. It could not explain why men's hearts beat faster when they saw red lips. It could not explain why women felt different when they wore them. It could not explain what the red really was, so it ignored it. It pretended the fear was just superstition. It pretended the power was just imagination. It pretended that red lipstick was just makeup. And for a while, that worked. For a while, people believed. But the red knew the truth, and it was patient. The 19th century arrived, the Victorian era, a time of strict morality, rigid social codes, and absolute control over women's bodies and behavior. Red lipstick was forbidden. Respectable women did not wear it, could not wear it, would not even think of wearing it. Only actresses wore red lips, and prostitutes, and women of the stage who were considered barely a step above the streetwalkers. The message was clear. Red lips meant you were available, meant you were loose, meant you were the kind of woman who did not deserve respect. And yet, women found ways. They bought lip color in secret, applied it in secret, wore it when their husbands were away, when they were alone, when no one could see, because the red called to them. Because once you have seen it, once you have felt its pull, you cannot forget. You cannot be ordinary again. Consider the case of a woman named Eleanor. She lived in London in the year 1850. She was the wife of a wealthy merchant. She had everything a woman of her time could want: a fine house, beautiful clothes, servants to attend to her every need. But she was not happy. She felt empty, hollow, like something was missing. One day, she saw an actress on stage. The woman's lips were red, deep red, vibrant red, red that seemed to glow under the gaslights. Eleanor could not look away. She went to the theater every night for a week, just to see that red. Then she found out where the actress bought her lip color. She sent a servant to purchase some. When it arrived, she locked herself in her room. She opened the small pot. She looked at the red. She applied it to her lips. And something happened. Something she could not explain. She felt different, stronger, more alive, more herself than she had ever felt before. She began wearing it whenever she was alone, just in her room, just when no one could see. But her husband noticed. Not the red, he never saw that. But he noticed that Eleanor had changed, that she seemed different, distant, preoccupied. He asked her what was wrong. She said nothing. He asked again. Still nothing. He became suspicious. One night, he came home early. He went to her room without knocking. He found her standing before a mirror, her lips glowing red. He stared at her. He could not look away. "What is that?" he whispered. Eleanor smiled. "It's just color," she said, "just red." But he knew it was not just color. He could feel it. The red was reaching for him, pulling at him, changing something inside him. He left the room without another word. He never spoke of it again, but he never looked at Eleanor the same way either. He was afraid of her now, afraid of what she had become, afraid of the red. The 20th century dawned. Everything changed. In 1912, women marched in New York City demanding the right to vote. And many of them wore red lipstick. They wore it as a symbol, as a statement, as a way of saying, "We are here. We will not be ignored. We will not be controlled." The suffragettes understood something that their grandmothers had known, that Cleopatra had known, that the unknown woman in Ur had known thousands of years before. Red lips were power, and they were taking that power for themselves. The cosmetic industry exploded. Companies like Guerlain, Elizabeth Arden, and Helena Rubinstein began producing lipsticks in factories, selling them in stores, marketing them to ordinary women for the first time in history. Red lipstick became respectable, became normal, became something that any woman could wear. But the old fear did not die. It just went underground. During World War I, women working in factories wore red lipstick as a symbol of patriotism. It was said to boost morale, to keep spirits up, to remind the men fighting overseas what they were fighting for. But there was more to it than that. The women who wore red in the factories knew something. They knew that the red gave them strength, that it helped them endure the long hours, the dangerous conditions, the exhaustion, that it connected them to something larger than themselves. They did not talk about it. They did not need to. They just wore the red, and the red did the rest. Between the wars, red lipstick became a symbol of freedom. Flappers wore it. Actresses wore it. Ordinary women wore it every day. It was no longer forbidden, no longer dangerous, no longer feared, or so it seemed. But underneath the surface, something else was happening, something that no one talked about, something that the cosmetic companies did not understand. The red was spreading. More women were wearing it than ever before in history. Millions of them, across continents, across cultures, across classes. The red was reaching more people than it had ever reached before, and it was changing them, subtly, slowly, in ways they did not notice. But it was changing them. During World War II, the American government actually encouraged women to wear red lipstick. They called it morale boosting. They said it helped keep up spirits on the home front. They even created a special shade called Victory Red that women were encouraged to wear. They thought they were controlling the red, using it for their own purposes. But they were wrong. The red was using them. Every woman who wore Victory Red was opening herself to something. Every woman who painted her lips was inviting something in. The government did not know this. They could not know. They only saw the surface. They did not see what lay beneath. Consider what happened in the factories during those years. Women worked long shifts, sometimes 16 hours a day, building the weapons and equipment that would win the war. They were exhausted, stretched thin, living on coffee and cigarettes and sheer determination. But when they wore their red lipstick, they found strength. Strength they could not explain. Strength that seemed to come from somewhere else. They did not question it. They just accepted it. Because the red gave, and they took. They did not understand that everything given must eventually be repaid. That the red was keeping score. That the red remembered. And that one day it would come to collect. The 1950s arrived. Red lipstick was everywhere. Movie stars wore it. Housewives wore it. Teenage girls wore it to school dances and soda fountains. It was normal now. Ordinary. Just another part of being a woman. But the red had not forgotten. It had not changed. It was still the same red that had been painted on lips in 5,000 years before. Still the same red that had made men lose their minds in ancient Rome. Still the same red that had sent women to the stake in medieval Europe. Still the same red that had watched and waited and grown stronger with every passing century. And it was still waiting. For what? That is the question no one could answer. The 1960s arrived. The counterculture, the sexual revolution, the breaking of old rules and old taboos. Red lipstick became something else again. It became rebellion. It became freedom. It became a way of saying, I am in control of my own body, my own choices, my own life. Women wore it to protests, to concerts, to love-ins and be-ins, and all the other gatherings of the era. They wore it because it felt good, because it made them feel powerful, because it connected them to something older than the rules that had tried to control them. And still the fear remained. Still there were whispers. Still there were warnings. Because underneath all the liberation, all the freedom, all the change, something else lurked. Something that had been there since the beginning. Something that the red had always carried with it. Consider what happened in the summer of 1967, the summer of love. Thousands of young people gathered in San Francisco to celebrate peace, love, and freedom. Many of the women wore red lipstick, bright red, deep red, all the shades of red that had ever existed. And something strange began to happen. People started having the same dream. They dreamed of a garden, a vast garden filled with tomato plants, red fruit hanging from every vine, and walking among them a woman with red lips. She did not speak. She did not move. She just stood there watching, waiting. The dream spread. More and more people had it. They talked about it in hushed voices, wondering what it meant. No one knew, but the women who wore red lipstick. They understood. They knew that the dream was real, that the garden was real, that the woman was real, and that she was getting closer. The 1970s and 1980s saw red lipstick become even more common. It was worn by businesswomen in boardrooms, by rock stars on stage, by ordinary women going about their daily lives. It was no longer special, no longer remarkable, just another product on the shelf. But the red did not care about being special. It cared about spreading, and it was spreading faster than ever. By the 1990s, red lipstick was everywhere, in every drugstore, every department store, every makeup counter in the world. In hundreds of shades, thousands of formulas, millions of tubes, more women were wearing red than at any time in history. More women were opening themselves to the red. More women were being changed. The 21st century. Red lipstick is everywhere. In every store, every drugstore, every makeup counter in the world. In every shade imaginable, from the palest pink to the deepest burgundy. In formulas that last for hours, that never smudge, that stay perfect from morning until night. Women wear it to work, to school, to the grocery store, to bed. No one knows what their grandmothers knew, but the red remembers. No one thinks twice. No one remembers the history. The red has not forgotten, and neither has something else. Something that has been watching since the beginning. Something that has been waiting. The scientists have studied red lipstick for decades. They have discovered that when a woman wears red, men's heart rates increase. Their pupils dilate. Their brains release chemicals associated with attraction and desire. They have discovered that women wearing red are perceived as more confident, more competent, more memorable than women wearing other colors. They have discovered that waitresses wearing red lipstick get bigger tips. That job applicants wearing red are more likely to be hired. That politicians wearing red are more likely to be elected. They call it the red effect. They explain it with evolution, with biology, with the ancient connection between red and fertility, red and readiness, red and the deepest drives of the human animal. But the scientists were not there. They did not see the women of painting their lips with red ochre and watching as the world changed around them. They did not see Cleopatra using red to bend empires to her will. They did not see the witches burning at the stake for the crime of being noticed. They did not see the suffragettes marching with red lips and demanding freedom. They did not hear the whispers. They did not feel the fear. They only see what they can measure, and they cannot measure what the red really is, what the red really does, what the red really wants. Because the red is not just color. It never was. The red is door. The red is invitation. The red is the thing that calls to something in the dark. And that something has been answering for a very long time. Think about it. Think about the last time you saw a woman wearing red lipstick. Really saw her, not just noticed her, not just registered her presence, but saw her in a way that stuck with you, that stayed in your mind long after she was gone. What was it about her? What made her different? What made you remember? Was it just the color, or was it something else? Something that the color carried with it, something that has been carried for thousands of years, passed from woman to woman, from generation to generation, from civilization to civilization, something that cannot be destroyed, something that cannot be forgotten, something that cannot be controlled. The women who wore red in the ancient world knew this. They knew that when they painted their lips, they were not just changing their appearance. They were tapping into something old, something powerful, something that had always been there, waiting for someone to find it. The women who wore red in the Middle Ages knew this. They knew that the church feared them, not because of what they were doing, but because of what the red represented, because of what it could do, because of what it might awaken. They wore it anyway, even at the risk of their lives, because once you have felt the power of red, you cannot go back. You cannot be ordinary again. The women who wore red in the Victorian era knew this. They knew that society had rules, that respectable women did not wear red, that wearing it marked you as something other, something dangerous, something that could not be controlled. They wore it anyway, in secret, in darkness, in the hidden spaces where no one could see, because the red called to them, because the red would not let them stop. The women who wear red today, do they know? Do they understand what they are tapping into? Do they feel it when they apply that color to their lips? That shift, that change, that sense that something has awakened? Or is it just habit now? Just routine? Just another step in the morning ritual? The red remembers, even if they do not. The red has not forgotten where it came from. The red has not forgotten what it can do. And the red has not forgotten what it is waiting for. What is it waiting for? That is the question no one can answer. The old stories do not say. They only say that it is patient, that it has always been patient, that it can wait as long as it needs to, because time means nothing to the red. It has existed since before humans walked the earth, since before the first woman looked at her reflection and thought, my lips could be redder. It will exist long after we are gone, long after our cities have crumbled, and our civilizations have fallen, and our bones have turned to dust. The red will remain, waiting, always waiting. For what? Perhaps for enough women to wear it. Perhaps for enough power to accumulate. Perhaps for the moment when the door opens wide enough for something to step through. Something that has been trying to get through for a very long time. Consider this. In the last 100 years, more women have worn red lipstick than in all of previous human history combined. Millions upon millions of women, each one opening herself to the red, each one inviting it in, each one becoming part of something larger. The red has never been this strong, never been this widespread, never been this close. And the woman in the garden, the one from the dreams, she is getting closer too. She appears to more people now, in dreams, in visions, in moments between sleep and waking when the mind is vulnerable. She stands among the tomato plants, her red lips glowing, her eyes watching, waiting, always waiting. For what? Perhaps for the moment when enough women have worn red. Perhaps for the moment when the door is open wide enough for her to step through. Perhaps for the moment when she can leave the garden and walk among us. The cosmetic companies will tell you that red lipstick is just makeup, just fashion, just another way to express yourself. They will tell you that the science is settled, that the red effect is natural, that there is nothing to fear. But they do not tell you about the women who came before. They do not tell you about the warnings. They do not tell you about the door, because they do not know. Or perhaps they do know. Perhaps they know more than they are telling. Perhaps the reason they spend millions of dollars studying the psychology of red is not just to sell more lipstick. Perhaps it is to understand something that has been puzzling them for years, something that does not show up in their data, something that cannot be explained by evolution or biology, or the ancient wiring of the human brain, something that is happening, something that is growing, something that is waiting. Consider this. In laboratories around the world, scientists are studying the effects of red on the human brain. They use fMRI machines to watch which parts of the brain light up when people see red. They measure heart rates, pupil dilation, sweat production. They analyze data from thousands of subjects, and they keep finding the same thing. The brain responds to red in ways it does not respond to any other color. It is not just attention, not just attraction. It is something deeper, something more primal, something that seems to bypass the higher brain entirely and speak directly to the oldest parts. They call it the red effect, but they do not know why it happens. They have theories: evolution, biology, the connection between red and ripe fruit, red and blood, red and danger. But theories are not answers, and the scientists know it. They know that something is missing, something they cannot find in their data, something that does not show up on their machines, something that has been there all along. The women who wear red, they know what the scientists do not. They feel it, that shift when the color touches their lips, that change in how people look at them, that sense that something has awakened. They do not talk about it. They do not need to. They just feel it, and they keep wearing red, because once you have felt it, you cannot stop. The red will not let you. Think about this. The next time you see a tube of red lipstick, think about the thousands of years of history behind that color. Think about the women who died for wearing it. Think about the power it represents. Think about what might be waiting on the other side. The woman in the garden. She has been waiting for a long time. She watched the first woman in Ur paint her lips with red ochre. She watched Cleopatra conquer kingdoms with her red mouth. She watched the witches burn, and she remembered their names. She watched Elizabeth rule England, and she felt the red grow stronger. She watched the suffragettes march, and she knew the time was coming. She watches now every woman who puts on red lipstick, every tube that opens, every mirror that reflects that color. She watches and she waits, because she knows something that no one else knows. She knows what happens when enough women wear red. She knows what happens when the door opens wide enough. She knows what steps through, and she is patient. She has always been patient. She can wait as long as she needs to. If you have made it this far, something kept you here. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the story itself. Maybe it was the way the words fit together, the rhythm of the telling, the questions that opened and have not yet closed. Or maybe it was something else, something older, something that remembers the first woman who painted her lips, something that knows the power of red, something that has been waiting for you to pay attention. This is the finale of this story, but it is not the end, because the story of red lipstick is not over. It is still being written. Every day, more women put on red lips. Every day, the door opens a little wider. Every day, the woman in the garden gets a little closer. And one day, perhaps soon, she will step through. What happens then? No one knows. The old stories do not say. They only say that it will be beautiful and terrifying, and that nothing will ever be the same. But before we go, before you close this video and return to your ordinary life, I want to ask you something. I want to know what you thought, not about the story itself, though that matters too, but about what it meant to you. This has been a journey. 4 episodes, hours of storytelling, thousands of years of history brought to life through words and whispers, and the darkness that lives between what we know and what we fear. We began with a woman named Clara Whitmore, who grew tomatoes and okra together in a garden where no one else would grow them. We watched as she crushed the fruit with her bare hands and painted her lips with a mixture that should never have been made. We heard the whispers through the crack in the wall. We felt the cold when something answered. We continued with Margaret, who grew nothing but tomatoes, who discovered that red could do more than stain the skin. We watched as her village changed around her, as people disappeared into her house at sunset and never came out the same. We felt the pull of that red, the hunger it created, the door it opened. We explored why people once feared tomatoes, uncovering the dark secret behind the red harvest. We learned about villages that vanished, about women who changed, about something that grew in the soil alongside the fruit and waited for the right moment to rise. And now we have traced the history of red lipstick itself. From the first woman in Ur, 5,000 years ago, to the witches burned at the stake, to the queens who ruled nations, to the millions of women today who wear red without knowing what they are tapping into. 4 stories, 4 doors, 1 red. Now I want to hear from you. Which episode was your favorite? Was it the first one, with Clara Whitmore and her garden of tomatoes and okra? The warning that was repeated for generations. The moment when the boys heard something answer from inside the shed. Was it the second, with Margaret and her sea of tomatoes? The way the red changed everyone who looked at her. The disappearances that no one remembered. Was it the third, with the dark secret behind why people once feared tomatoes? The villages that vanished. The truth about what grows in the soil alongside the fruit? Or was it this one, the finale, the dark history of red lipstick that nobody talks about. The story of power and fear, and something that has been waiting for 5,000 years. Tell me in the comments. I want to know what stayed with you. What image haunts you? What moment made you look over your shoulder in the dark? I want to know what you felt when you heard these stories, because that feeling, that pull, that hunger to know more, that is the red. It is in you now. It has been in you since the moment you started listening, and it will not let go. If you enjoyed these stories, if they held you, kept you, made you want to know what happens next, then there are 3 things I need you to do. First, tap the like button, not because it helps the algorithm, not because the platform wants you to, but because the act of liking is an act of attention. And attention is what these stories are about. Attention is what the red wants. Attention is the most valuable thing in the world, and you just gave it to me. Second, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with a woman who wears red lipstick. Share it with a man who has ever wondered why he cannot look away. Share it with someone who loves tomatoes, who grows them in their garden, who eats them without thinking about where they came from. Share it with someone who needs to know that the warnings were real. And third, follow for more stories, because this is not the end. This is just the beginning. There are many everyday things around us with strange beginnings that people rarely talk about. The food on your table, the clothes on your back, the color on your lips, the images that stick in your mind long after you have seen them. Each one has a story. Each one comes from somewhere. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the somewhere is darker than you can imagine. Here in this place, we explore them all. So stay close, stay curious, and always return here for more original, unbelievable stories about the hidden origins of everything. Watch for the next video. It will be different from these. Darker, perhaps. Stranger, certainly. It will be about something you see every day. Something you use without thinking. Something that has a history you would never guess. The title is not ready yet, but the story is. And it is waiting, just like the red, always waiting. For you, the garden is still there. The women are still there. The red is still there. Waiting, always waiting. For you, and the next time you see a tube of red lipstick, or a tomato in a grocery store, or a woman whose lips seem to glow with a color that does not exist in nature. Think about the stories you have heard here. Think about the women who came before. Think about the door and ask yourself, who is really choosing what you see? You, or something that has been waiting for you to look? The woman in the garden smiles. She has been waiting for a long time, but she can wait a little longer because she knows. She knows that you are listening. She knows that you remember. She knows that soon, very soon, you will understand. And when you do, you will never look at red the same way again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being part of this journey. Now go. The darkness is waiting, and so is the red.